what can you feel is working when you're riding?
If people get off this podcast right now and they're like, I feel really inspired, what's one thing that they should start and one thing that they should stop? This episode is sponsored by Premier Performance and Toggy Clothing.
Hello everybody, welcome back. Week 8. How you doing, Rhi? How's your week been?
Happy Wednesday. Yeah, it's been good, thanks. What have we done this week? Oh, well, work-wise, I had probably one of the biggest presentations of my career, which was very cool.
This is so cool.
It was cool. I sent Miri the professional photos came in from the event today, and I sent her a picture, and I was like, "Look, there I am presenting." So
such a big deal. I think you're really good at underselling how cool your corporate, the other half of your life is to the riding with Rhi. And I think I'm a bit of a fangirl if I'm honest. So go on, tell us about it.
I went to Google with the group that I work for.
Just Google, guys. Google. Just the biggest search engine in the whole earth. Anyway, carry on. Keep going. I'll just keep hyping you up as you tell us this story.
I was presenting on something called the Agentic Future, which is AI agents are a new thing in the space, and we have a product and service that we have in that space, and I've been helping to kind of develop and run it with our clients. So it's really exciting, and it's something that it's a real just a fun space for me. I'm really enjoying it, and it felt really good to get up there and talk about it with people. So that was a lovely
That's
moment.
A really big deal. Public speaking is such a hard thing, and I think a lot of people will, resonate with the acknowledgement of how big a deal that is. I remember when I did some public speaking before, I was physically sick on the day because I was so nervous. So how did you find that experience? Was it nerve-wracking, or because because it's your wheelhouse, you're like, yeah, I'm good?
Yeah, I mean, I present a lot at work and I really enjoy presenting. Generally speaking, I'm very comfortable presenting work. I think I felt a bit nervous because I felt like it was a really big deal. I wanted to do a really good job, so it was more my own pressure. But I think I was saying to a friend, they had a job interview this week and they ride at Grand Prix, and I was like, it's just a centre line. I was like, as soon as you start the first question, it's like starting the test. It will just fall away and you'll just be in your flow. And so it felt a bit like that, which was cool.
That's actually a really good way of looking at it. I struggle with travel anxiety, going away on holidays, it's a fear of mine. And a friend of mine who's a yoga teacher, she said, I get really anxious too. And I always find that interesting. People don't necessarily talk about it, but almost every person experiences some level of anxiety or discomfort or something. And she said, and same as what you said, it's just one thing at a time. You've just got to do the one thing, the centre line, and then it's just the next one, and then it's the next one after that. And I guess it's the same with any big thing. You kind of just got to start, right? So that's good. Oh, well, I'm glad, and I'm glad that feels comfortable for you, because I think, a lot of people would find that really not comfortable, but it's nice that it is, because that's such a cool thing to do.
It was. I felt very pleased. And the other thing, and I'll update you as we travel this path, but we noticed that Harley wasn't feeling as comfortable in the bit that he's wearing, or we had a hunch that he's not as comfortable. And Miri actually called this.
He's been in that bit for quite a long time, hasn't he?
Yes, he has. So we had him in a slightly different bit when he first arrived. He didn't seem to like it, so we asked the seller what they had him in, and they had him in this bit, so we switched it to this. And I'm saying this bit like it's a secret. It's not. I just can't remember the name of it. It's
a neutral trans-angled lozenge.
That's the one. Well done, Miri. Miri knows everything.
But do you know why I know that? Because I rode horses in the same bit for years and years, this Shire's snaffle, right? And unfortunately you can't see my fingers when you're listening to this, but it was like a snaffle with a curved mouthpiece. So I'm putting my index fingers together with a gentle curve, and then they brought out this trans-angled neutral one, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna buy that because it's the upgraded version, because it's a neutral bit and it's nicer. I have yet to find a horse that likes it.
Really?
So then, genuinely, I think I still got it, but the problem with it is now my fingers are straight, and the sides that sit on the horse's bars, so the fleshy, soft part of the horse's mouth, I'm now touching my cheeks, where the bit sits are squashy, and for an Irish draft like Harley, I would imagine if he's anything like any of the Irish drafts that I have on my yard, very fleshy. And when we say fleshy, guys, like they have like this pockety kind of squooshy bit, and it feels all like, it looks like I'm like touching my face, like jelly, right? It's like jelly.
Yeah, on the inside. Yeah.
On the inside. So this is why when Rhi said she was riding him in this bit a little while ago, because you were about to say Miri called this a while ago.
I did.
Yes. Yeah, I said that's interesting. Like, I wonder if he'll like that.
What an interesting choice you are making, and I will not get involved, but also interesting choices.
Unless you ask me, I will not share my opinion, because that is a thing, right? Like, and I'm really careful of that on the internet.
Good at that, yeah.
Like, Rhi and I talk a lot, but obviously Rhi has her coach and she trains with Hannah, and they obviously have an amazing relationship, and I'm not there to get involved, but every now and then Rhi has said, oh, what do you think about this? Or she'll say, oh, I'm trying this, and then doesn't ask for my opinion, so I just have to go, okay, carry on, because I've got loads to say to everyone about everything, because I'm very opinionated.
You are good, because you sometimes will be like, would you like my opinion? Because like when we were talking about Harley and the arenas thing, I was like, hey, this is happening, this is what I'm thinking, and you were like, would you like my opinion? And I was like, yes. So it's helpful. So
exactly.
Anyway, what we've tried him in, or what we changed him into, and the little things I saw, just for the record, in case you were wondering, were when I went to tack him up, he would just like, it would just be quite hard to get him to open his mouth for the bit, which wasn't something before that I ever had any problems with. He was always very comfortable in his tack. It was the same sort of thing, when I knew he needed the physio again or the saddler again, it was because he just turned away from me when I brought the saddle pad into the stable. This is a horse who, when he's wanting to, like, when you tack him up, he is like at the door. Like, he actually walked out of the stable today. He was like, I am ready to go, let's do it. So that was sort of unusual. And he was also just throwing his head up quite a lot in canter. And when we were jumping, which is unusual for him, because he stopped doing that quite a while ago, and that was an unusual thing for him to do, especially given the way I was riding. So anyway, we've borrowed a friend's, it is called the Trust something. Maybe, that sounds right. It's a, Miri knows all the bits. This is why we're a great pair. It's a rubber straight bar, and it's just a snaffle ring, but it can't swivel, so it's like fixed, basically. An egg butt, thank you. Jesus, I'm really showing myself up today.
Don't worry. I literally train horses for a living, so it's fine that I know these things. If I didn't, I don't think I'd be very good at it. And I also just have a very good brain. My brain just like associates a picture to a thing really well.
Yes, okay. Well, thank you for validating that.
I love bits
wrote
too.
him
It's
out.
like a thing for me. So we could do an episode on bits.
Yeah,
maybe not a very
bit fitting
friendly thing, actually.
Well, I don't know. I have had a bit fitter before, but I just don't know that I just find that's a whole other conversation. But it's it's hard to get a good read. So anyway, we switched him into this bit. He went from being very kind of, but almost behind my leg, and very kind of almost like he was very relaxed and lazy and sunbathing, to suddenly being like back and tiggery and beautiful, which is what he does when he jumps. And
so it was like almost change. That feeling of like sucking back behind the bridle to then wanting to be forward and into the connection.
Exactly, but it didn't manifest as like him hiding behind the contact, like I'm sucking my neck back to my chin. It wasn't him going like backwards. It just manifested in him behaving in a way that felt really relaxed, but actually that was just him being like, I just don't want loads of contacts, actually it's not super comfortable.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And it's interesting because it's important to pick up those things. Anyway, jumped him in the new bit, was great, went hacking with a friend today, and we went for a lovely canter through this big field, and he just popped up into canter beautifully, no head shaking, no movement, had the contact, I could feel it in my hand, and it felt really stable, like it was nice. Good. So nice. The search for the long-term bit continues, but I'll keep you updated.
I've got some ideas, but she's yet to listen. We'll see whether I'll keep you updated whether she takes my advice. But anyway, I'm glad. What?
Miri's going to be like, I'm going to record something, and if she doesn't take my advice, and then in 6 months' time, I can be like, I told you so.
I told you so. So when I said that you should be using the blah 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 blah, that. Anyway, there we are. I actually had a bit that I was going to send you in the post, and then when I say it evaporated into thin air, I don't know what happened to it. I lent it to someone, and between them giving it back to me and me putting it back in my tack room, it evaporated, and I'm really upset actually. I should probably go and buy another one, but
I'm going to track one of those down and see if I can try it, so that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because I think it'll be worth it, and you've been talking about that bit for like 6 months, so I should probably give it a go.
I'm going to mention the bit now. It's called an Expert Bits Comfy Barrel. And I have found a lot of horses really like it. Often people think that a thicker bit is the solution to their problem. But actually, I tend to find that not necessarily, this isn't a hard and fast rule, but this bit that is slightly thinner, it's very shaped. I'm doing fingers again, and my fingers have a curve in them with a gap between them now. So like my fingers are nearly at 90 degrees. It means it sits over the bars in the mouth, so the really fleshy part, and then has this lovely soft feeling in the mouth. I ride Zora in one, I ride Blondie in one, I ride Belle in one, I ride Bee in one, I ride Tink in one, Teddy in one, Luca in one, Gypsy in one. That is how many horses on my yard are in a similar shaped mouthpiece. Because this mouthpiece, the expert bits, shout out, let us know if you want to join up. It's a fantastic piece of equipment. Anyway, that sounds like a nice week that you've had. I'm glad that you're making some progress with little Harley boy.
Thank you. I had one final thing I wanted to share, which is just a quote I read on TikTok. It was from a book, but I just thought it was nice, and then I'll ask you how your week was. So the quote is, "I think and think and think. I've thought myself out of happiness a million times, but never once into it." And that is by an American novelist called Jonathan Safran Foer, I think is the pronunciation. But I just thought that's really nice. I like that a lot. Thinking yourself into happiness instead of out of it.
Yeah, practicing gratitude is such a relevant thing. And I'm going to talk about something like that, actually, that I read on social media. So I'm just going to read it. I read it, and then I have rewritten it myself for a bit more for myself. So it was written by somebody called Natalie Poll, I think, on Instagram. She's a painter, I think. She's an influencer, maybe, I guess. Everything is very brightly coloured and glorious, and she lives in an amazing part of the world where it's dark half the year and light half the year. So people that live in that kind of hemisphere have a very interesting take on the seasons and stuff. Anyway, I'm 90 years old, but I woke up in my 32-year-old body today. I ran outside and felt the sun on my face and the grass under my feet. I played with my dogs until they lay down for a nap. Oh, how I have missed them all of these years. I went for a walk I used to love. The route was hard, but I wondered why I didn't do these things more often when I had the chance and when my body felt able. I looked at myself in the mirror and wondered why I ever worried about my flaws or felt insecure about my beautiful, healthy body when I could be living and thriving. I felt only gratitude for my amazing body, no shame or insecurity. We had dinner and ate outside with flowers on the table because life is a special occasion and every moment can be cherished. I took photos and videos of my day and kept them all, regardless of whether I looked perfect, because perfect won't capture memories. I fell asleep so grateful, so full of love for the life I had at 32, the people and the body I had that could do so much. The experiences I still had to live and feel. I don't know how many days I have left on the earth at 90 years old. I would give anything to go back to being 32, to live less distracted. To be less inhibited and less afraid to change. To worry less what people think, to try and be someone I am not, instead of just focusing on the beautiful moments in front of me.
I really love that.
And I think I like that. Sorry.
Yeah, that's quite a... No, it's okay. Emotional's okay. It obviously had quite an emotional reaction for you, and I remember you saying that when you first read it, it got that. So what was it about that really resonated?
I think similar to the quote that you read, I spend so much of my life worrying about everything. And it really takes the joy out of so much. Going out for food with friends, I worry so much about feeling anxious that it really steals the joy of the reality of how grateful I should be to be able to go and eat food in a restaurant and not care. I don't have to worry about paying for it, or that I've got somewhere else I need to be, or and I worry so much about things going wrong, or just being worried, actually. So I like worry about worrying, because worrying is so controlling, and if I worry, then maybe I'll be sick and maybe it will take over the moment, and there's such a cycle for me. So like thinking of who I'll be when I'm 90, looking back, when I will have lived all of those things and done all of the hard stuff and experienced all of the amazing opportunities and all of the things, and maybe having a family and living your life, raising kids and that kind of thing, which is something that I would love to be able to do if I get the opportunity to. And it's kind of like it's mad to look back in that way. Like looking forward, I think, is nice, and looking back to when you were young is a nice thing to do, but almost imagining that you're old and you're looking back as you are now, like how would you live your life differently if you had the chance to do it again? Like if you were given life again, what would you do differently? And I think we all get that opportunity to actually just do that today. And it is the work, that is what I would call the work, like life's work, like trying to find that gratitude in every day and be present and not live in that worry and that fear state. But I think it resonates so much because the desire for that is really strong, but the nervous system response is still really strong. And it's something I am constantly in conversation with myself as such. And I have help and therapy, so, don't worry, guys, I'm not just out here battling on my own. But if you are battling on your own, please don't be. There is so many resources out there. And, that really resonated. So I wanted to share it. That hasn't been how my whole week has been, though. So that's something. What did it feel like to you when I read it?
Yeah, it reminded me of a couple of things I've seen around, enjoy your body today because someone somewhere is wishing that they had or that they could. And it also sort of resonates in the context of, I went for dinner with a friend last night and we've known each other since we were at school, which is a real privilege actually. And we're both 31. And we were talking about how different it is not in your 30s, but how you feel as a person, like when you're in your 20s and you're so much more vulnerable, you don't really know who you are, you don't know what you stand for, your confidence is easily shaken. And I'm not saying that stuff doesn't exist when you're in your 30s, but you start to like learn who you are. I mean, there's always that quote, isn't there? It's like 30s are like your 20s but with money. For me, it's like 30s are like your 20s but with self-confidence or self-belief, or the begins to bloom a little bit more.
Yeah. And you have a little bit more confidence. You have more confidence in your decisions, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And it actually leads a little bit, I think, to... We're going to talk about rider fitness in the episode today, and we've got two really incredible guests. But what I think I've learned about my fitness journey with the horses is just how much of a link it has to my mental state. And I don't just mean my mental health, although that is very impacted by my my workouts and stuff, but also just how I feel, like the confidence I get from... I think I talked about this on my Instagram last year, but like the confidence I felt with the first day that I wore a sports bra in the gym, because that was a milestone for me that felt really important for my relationship with my body and how confident I was, or how I feel when I do an exercise I never thought I could, and like the way that makes me feel. And how that then impacts riding. Because for me, I don't know about you, Miri, but riding is such a mental sport. Like, I've never had a sport where so much of the emphasis is actually on how you feel up here, I'm tapping my head, as opposed to how your body is working.
Definitely. And like, to draw back to why I felt that was relevant to read that quote, that little kind of exercise, whatever you want to call it, was because of the relevance of like how our bodies feel at our age now. And like you're saying, like you're like somebody else would give a lot to feel how your body feels. And I think that's why I was like, this is relevant, because actually we have, our bodies are capable of so much at our age, and it's important to not only look after that, and that's what we're going to talk about today, and how we do that and all the rest of it. But why that's so important for our horses, and why it's nice to like remember that it won't always be like that. And that's important. And I think, you know, going back to like what you were saying about the mental, physical side of it, I think because I ride horses for a living, I have to basically make sure that I am as regulated as I can be when it comes to my horses. So like I notice that if I'm really tired and I haven't had enough days off and I'm feeling a bit like run down, my patience is very short, and I won't act on it, but I will notice it. You know, a horse runs into me, literally, and I have to be very careful. You know, I basically need to be able to be unreactive to that. A horse tries to bite me. We have a little pony now.
It can't be an emotional response.
It can't be an emotional response. And I really, really noticed before I hit burnout, like before disaster struck, my patience was short. And I had to be like, you know, I'd have to have moments where I'd be like, okay, take a breath. Like I'd have to talk to myself in that moment. Whereas now, since I've done all of the work I've done, and like I say, evidently I'm still working on it, but it's so different to where it was. I don't feel like that. Literally, a horse bit me the other day, swung round and took a chunk out of me. That was actually Duchess when I first touched her legs,
Duchess.
because she was so worried about me asking her to pick up her leg. She swung round and bit me. I just didn't even flinch. Nothing. I had like 3 coats on, so it didn't hurt.
Yeah.
But she swung around, she took a real chunk out of me, and I just stood there and I thought, okay, that's where you're at, this is where I'm at. And that is that. And now what I'm doing, Rhi's looking at me like, what are you doing? Because I told that story and I got a bit emotional, I noticed that I'm having a bit of an incomplete nervous system response. This was something else I wanted to talk about. You know, we talked about shaking really early on the second episode. What we have to make sure of when we do our shaking, our little somatic shake. So if you find yourself in a difficult position and you've had something triggering or upsetting and you do a little shake, is that you make sure that after you shake, you do a bit of breathing, like sighing. So, you know, you can let the energy out of your body, and then, a few times, have a sigh. And it can have some noise behind it if you're on your own. It's a bit of a personal thing to sigh, actually. I met a man once that said it's like walking into a cafe with your pants off. Sighing. But what I'm doing right now to help my body go through this nervous system response, as in I cried, and then I've been breathing and I've talked about it, is I'm rubbing my arms in a smooth movement. This is called havening. So you cross your arms, you put your hands on your shoulders, and then you rub your arms down from your shoulders to your wrists, and it's like a soothing thing. You would do it to a baby, essentially, or a child. And it really helps to let your body like come back down again. And this is what is so important. Like our bodies, right? They go up. They need to be able to come back down. And that's what I really struggle with. I struggle with the coming back down. So yeah. Let's talk, before we meet our guests for today, Rhi.
Yes.
What does rider fitness, and I know that, and I want, you know, this isn't going to be like how many burpees can you do kind of conversation, but more around the kind of the whole image, the whole side of riding and us taking responsibility for us, I think. But yeah, what does it mean to you? What does that mean to you?
So I think my initial exploration into rider fitness really started when I had Woody, because he was asymmetric, and so I sort of started looking into ways that we can help sort of be as balanced and symmetrical as possible. So that was my beginning. Now with Harley, it's about being the best mentor for him. And when I took him to the arena hire on my own the other day, it was the first time. I've been working with Steph, who we're going to speak to today, for about a year, and she sets my workouts in the gym. And for me, it's very much like, yes, it's a physical strength thing of getting stronger, but it's also very mental in terms of challenges and confidence. And I was riding him around and he was feeling so great, and I remember thinking, this feels amazing. I feel like I have the stamina to give him the support he needs. I feel like I'm in control of all the different parts of my body, so I'm balanced in a way that can support him. Mentally, I feel really prepared and really like confident in my ability to handle whatever comes next. And like, that has been built in the gym. And like, some people won't understand this relationship with the gym, and that's okay, because it's not for everyone. But like, there have been moments when I've been set a workout and it looks really difficult, and I'm like really afraid to start. Like, I would actually get butterflies because I'd be so afraid of failing. And then I kind of had to sit myself down and be like, what does failure mean? And being like, there's no consequences to you failing, you just come back and try another day. And I had to get really comfortable with like being like, this isn't failure, this is just a learning experience. And that all of that attitudinal stuff has totally changed how I show up for my horse. To your point, like, my responses aren't as emotional. I feel like I can be the mentor, as opposed to, what is it? Mentor, mother, dictator. Are those the three? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not being the mother. And just my own mental health.
What we mean by that is like...
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't explain.
When you're like mothering a horse, you're going, oh, it's okay, don't worry, it's okay, it's fine, don't worry, you're going to be okay. And the reality is you can't do that for a 600 kilo animal. Like,
well, you're not backing it up with any actual support. You're just kind of going, oh, we're fine, everything's okay, and like, that's actually not helpful.
No, and it's actually not okay. I remember I had one of my clients, she remembers this moment really clearly. She brought a horse to my yard. And when I say this horse was dysfunctional, like, wow, dysfunctional. And one of the first days we were going down to the arena, and this horse is like having a really, really hard time. She'd lived a very insular life, and the previous owner had basically managed every element of her life. She came to mine and like the wheels fell clean off. And I remember her owner said, it's okay, you're going to be okay. And I said, don't tell her that she's okay. She knows she's not okay right now. And in telling her that she is okay, you are devaluing the experience that she is having right now, because she needs to know that the way she's feeling isn't actually all right and it needs to change. But in just saying to her, you're okay, you're fine, don't worry, you're fine. She's like, I'm worrying, I'm not fine. Why are you saying that? You're lying to me. You know?
And also, you don't know. You clearly have no idea how to be a leader, because everything is not okay.
Exactly.
Which is different to being a mentor who's like, I can understand that you are struggling with this.
And that is what I often become for these horses, is I say to you, I see you, I hear you, I know this isn't a suitable situation. Can I offer you some advice? How about you try this? And then they go, oh, thank God for that, someone noticed. And that is the biggest thing, and I think we talk about this a lot on this podcast, is that awareness point. And that's a point of ourselves. And that is what fitness for me is. It is that awareness of self for me, of where am I strong? Where do I need to be stronger, weaker, softer, whatever it might be. So I work on myself so that then I can be the best possible guide for those horses that come into my care.
We are so excited to be joined by Maeve and Steph, our guests for today, in just a few minutes. But before we do that, a huge thank you to our sponsor today, Toggy. Sunny days are just around the corner, and Toggy's SS25 collection has just landed. The gorgeous emerald colour is a statement from the collection and one of my favourites, reimagining some of my staple pieces in a new shade. One such piece is the Sculptor Marit Women's Full Seat Riding Tights, which I have in a navy from a previous collection. High-waisted and supportive with a stripe of colour down the side and gold accents. I've been wearing these on the horse, at the gym, and if we're really honest, out for coffee, between washes of course. If you're looking for a special piece of clothing for spring, you can use the code TEL15 to get an exclusive discount. Thanks, Toggy. Okay, we are now joined by our guests for the episode. So with me and Miri, we have Maeve Sheriden and Stephanie Jane Brumpton. So Steph and I have been working together for about a year now, and Steph sets all of the workouts that I do in the gym designed with my equestrian stuff in mind, and I have found it to be really helpful, both from a physical point of view but also like my mental health, and she's such a cheerleader. Maeve is an equine, is it physiotherapist? Is that the right phrase? Okay, good. I just had a mini panic attack and was like, that's not the word. Maeve is a human and equine physiotherapist and also runs Activate Your Seat, which you may have seen me using before. It's a bungee with a big blue piece at the end, and it's essentially a kit that you can take anywhere, to the stables, competition, to the gym, do at home, and essentially do a range of exercises that are designed to make you a better rider in the saddle. So I love all of these women. I think this is another like stellar cast. I thought it might be nice, maybe we introduce you, or you introduce yourselves actually to our lovely community. So Maeve, why don't we start with you? Give us a little introduction to you.
Yeah, my name's Maeve Sheriden. I'm a chartered physiotherapist and I'm also a veterinary physiotherapist. I am based in Scotland, originally from Ireland. I came over here a long time ago, 1996, to do my original physiotherapy degree. So I was in Aberdeen for 4 years to do that, and then I moved to Edinburgh. I worked in the NHS for 9 years, did a lot of private practice, a lot of sports physio, and I also retrained at that time to do my vet physio postgraduate diploma down at the RVC in London. And then I have worked for the last probably 19 years treating horses and horse riders, exclusively horse riders, probably for the last 13, 14, 15 years maybe. And then I set up Activate Your Seat, I think 6 years ago now. It was an idea in my head for a long time before that. It just took me ages to kind of get it started. But it's an online exercise program designed specifically for riders because of all the issues that I see with riders and the issues that they have in the saddle. So it's kind of targeted for horse riders. When I started, there wasn't much out there for riders, and what was out there I wasn't a huge fan of. So I kind of finally sorted myself out and started something.
I already have questions bubbling away, particularly ones about gym balls and Bosu balls, because I feel like you have quite a specific opinion on those, and I've also had a very bad experience with those.
I was going to say, isn't it just because you fell off one once, that's why you
well,
don't
I broke my arm, and you're not meant to use them like that. Anyway, we'll get to those, but Steph, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi guys. So I'm Steph. I own the Rider Fitness app and also SJB Performance Training. My story into the equestrian world is a little bit of a unique one, really. So I didn't actually start riding myself until I was 19, so I was quite late to the party.
Wow.
I was actually a professional dancer, and I partially tore my Achilles, which ended my career, unfortunately. I needed something to fill the void in my life, and I was actually stood at Burley horse trials. I was stood on the cross country and I was like, this is what I'm meant to be doing. And I know that sounds really weird. I decided I was going to give it a go. And I was really lucky that I actually went from BE80 to 2-star and intermediate in just 2 years. Obviously, I had a very, very good horse. I worked very, very hard, but I was really determined that that's what I wanted to do. The year that I decided I was going to start riding, Alex Postolowski, one of my clients, was actually competing in the 5-star at Burley. I didn't know her at that point, and she's the reason I got into the equestrian S&C, like sport-specific strength and conditioning. She came to me wanting to pass her rider fitness jockey test. All of these athletes, they're all training, all got S&C coaches, and it wasn't a thing that was done in the equestrian world. And I was kind of like, there's such a massive gap here for people to improve, but people didn't understand that how much difference it could make to their riding.
I think that's often because people see riding as the sport, right? So if you ride the horse, that riding the horse is the thing that makes you strong, when actually you've got a great phrase, Maeve, that I was going to say a few times. Go on, hit us.
Your horse is not your gym.
There we go. And that is like so important, right? Like we have to take responsibility.
Yeah, so important. Obviously, I see it from both sides because I treat a lot of horses. A lot of horses often ridden by the same jockey. And so say I go to a yard where I might see 10 horses that are all ridden by the same rider, I can tell you exactly what that rider is doing in the saddle. Because all the horses present with the similar issues.
Do you tell them?
Well, that's how I start treating them. Yeah. But yeah, I know when I need to see them.
So what we need to do is tie your left hand behind your back. Off you go again. There we go. Now see if you can turn left. Interesting.
But you've both mentioned, I love this phrase, sport-specific training. And I think it's become a lot like trendier in the equestrian space. People are popping up who are talking about trying to do equestrian specific exercises, but you've both been around for a little bit longer. Maeve, I'm curious to hear, when you think about sport specific training for equestrians, are there any like fundamentals in terms of either exercise or parts of the body that you focus on when it comes to how equestrians should be training?
I think there's pros and cons for that sport specific thing, because sometimes I think it gets taken too far, where they try and make the exercise look like what you want to do on the horse. And that's when we get into the Bosu ball, kneeling on a gym ball, standing on a gym ball, all that nonsense.
Steph's laughing for those who can't see.
And that actually really winds me up, as you might know, if you follow me, because it often leads to injuries.
Yes,
you know.
Yes, it does.
And I think it's actually, it's not worth it for the injury that might happen. Actually, you don't get that much out of it. So yes, we need to be sport specific, but sport specific is very trendy at the minute online for riding stuff, and it's very trendy to make it look like something that you're doing on the horse, and actually you just need the basics. So I tend to focus with my program, it's very much focused on the level 1 exercises, particularly on the muscles of the rider's seat, so which is why it's called Activate Your Seat. So it is all about getting the muscles around the hips and the pelvis to be stronger and more capable and more mobile, so that you can be more symmetrical on the horse. And for me, that's where I would target that, and I do a lot of breathing work. If you follow me, you'll know that as well. But that's where I would target. Then you're just layering on top of that, and with basic stuff. It doesn't need to be. It needs to be sport specific in that you want to target the right areas of the body, but it also needs to be whole body. But it doesn't need to be sport specific in that it mimics what people do on the horse.
And Steph, you were nodding along there. Obviously, in our training, there is stuff that feels, oh yeah, I can see how this relates to something in the saddle. But there's also compound movements, there's stuff around core, stability, balance, and then there's the stamina stuff with the conditioning. So how do you think about your riders and their fitness for the both sport specific and, I guess, broader, to Maeve's point?
Yeah, so for me, I take a person as a whole. So we look at obviously their job title, so what they're doing from day to day. We look at their sport, so whether they're dressage, eventer, show jumper, that will determine obviously how much conditioning they're doing. That will determine how much strength work they're doing, the leg position, all sorts of things like that. Obviously, we like a overall balanced athlete, and I use that word and everyone always laughs at me, but equestrians are athletes, all levels, you are an athlete. And I think that's something that people need to get their head around a little bit, thinking about themselves as an athlete, not just obviously the horse, because we give our horses all the supplements, we treat them to all the massages and the body work and all of that, but then we don't tend to think about ourselves in this picture at all. And for me, massively changing the mindset of like, what we need to be achieving on the horse. So for example, like core strength, a lot of people, there was a big thing back in the day where planks and things like that, we're going to get our cores really strong. And actually, yes, you're going to get a strong core, but moving away from that and creating a little bit more of the dynamic movement and remembering our cores, not just our abdominals, thinking about the entire trunk of the body. So I know, Rhi, you're nodding your head because you know this. We do so much posterior chain work.
It's awful. it's so hard.
Steph, can you explain what the posterior chain is?
Absolutely. So basically the entire back of your body in your trunk. So all of the muscles through your back, your glutes, all of the posterior chain, hamstrings, all the way down. So and this is what I noticed with a lot of riders I work with. They actually have really strong abdominals, and the number one thing people come to me and say, I've got a really weak core. That's the first thing people say to me. And I'm like, okay, let's have a look. Let's test that. And I can guarantee their abdominals actually aren't that weak. Obviously, sometimes like pelvic strength and a little bit of things are going on, but majority of people, we start to fire up their posterior chain, and it transforms their position when they're in the saddle.
Maeve, as someone who biomechanically looks at people, what would somebody with a weak posterior chain look like on a horse? Because I think I know the answer to this, but I think, and I see it a lot, and I see it a lot in show jumpers actually, a lot of the time. Anyway, what would it look like that you
They would tend to tip forward a lot and tend to lose balance a lot. Tip forward. And yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly with Steph that people get obsessed about core, like 100% obsessed about core. Oh, I need to work on my core. And they come into me here at clinic and they'll be like, oh, I've been working on my core. And like that. I'm like, we need to get you to breathe, first of all, because that's really important. So when people tend to fixate on these abdominals and fixate about really bracing through their abdominals, they're really fixing through the abdominals, they block their diaphragm from working, so they stop themselves breathing. And this is the one thing I see over and over and over with all riders, from happy hackers to 5-star eventers. They block their breathing. And so your diaphragm is the muscle of breathing. It's a muscle at the base of your lungs, and it works in conjunction with your deep abdominals and with your pelvic floor muscles, and all three of those control your intra-abdominal pressure. So if you're blocking the diaphragm from working, you're blocking everything else from working, and it's a synchronized movement. It's subconscious. You don't need to overly think about it. It should just happen naturally. But if you're doing that all the time, then it doesn't happen, and then they start to use all their neck and shoulder muscles to breathe. They tip forward, they can't breathe, they run out of puff during a 2-minute show jumping around or a 5-minute dressage test, and they really struggle to breathe. So I find that a lot. That's probably the one thing that I focus on when they come through the door with me. It's the very first thing that we look at, is how they're breathing and how much they're fixing through those abdominals.
I agree with that as well. I hear a lot, what muscles should I be squeezing? How should I be holding? What should I'm like, you shouldn't. I was like, breathe, relax. You should be moving. Everything should activate correctly if we're working in the correct way. It comes back to how well you move and the mobility and that side of things. Yeah. And once you've got that, you can then start to build the strength and the conditioning. But it starts with the fundamentals of how well you move.
What I also find that I talk to people about is like, what can you feel is working when you're riding? So for me, when I wasn't strong, so I've taken up CrossFit recently. I'm going to have to talk about this a little bit because we love CrossFit.
I am very impressed by your CrossFit.
Thank you very much.
I've never done it, but no. Steph does.
Oh, really?
I compete at CrossFit and High Rocks, so yeah.
Love that. But what is so interesting about it is your whole body. Like you go to the gym and you're like, I didn't even know I'd used that bit. Like the other day I was doing loads of stuff, and my ribs, I thought it felt like I'd been punched, and it wasn't. It was just all of my like obliques and the sides of my ribs was so sore from working those. But before I was going to the gym, my back was always tired. I'd ride for 20 minutes, like having a proper flat work lesson, and my back was where I would feel it. So you'd think, like people were saying, your core needs to be strong. Actually, no, it's that posterior, that holding you, the thing that is supporting you is far more than the front. And I noticed my back was weak because it hurt. So if you're riding and you're maybe noticing, and that's maybe a good question, is what questions do you ask people to help them then understand where they need to get stronger, maybe? Is that a good question to ask? Does that help pinpoint maybe directing people into what maybe they need to be doing to help themselves? Like if they have real hip pain, for example, is it more about mobility? Is it more about strength? What are the kind of things that people could be looking at? Anybody, please.
For hip pain, it would depend on the person. So from my point of view, obviously as a physio, I would do a kind of, if they were coming to me as a client with hip pain on the horse, then we would look at lots of things, that like what the range of movement is in the hip, a whole history, age, massive impact, any previous injuries, hip problems as a child, hypermobility syndrome. That's a huge kind of topic. But then we would do kind of specific tests of range of movement, special tests to kind of try and reproduce the pain, strength testing.
So actually, So actually, maybe the relevant question to ask is, if you are feeling discomfort when you're riding, then it is a case of going to a physio, an osteo, and having that discussion about it, and they will then be able to help pinpoint it, rather than
absolutely, because there
people
could
self-serving,
be a
isn't.
whole there could be a whole lots of underlying conditions with that you would want to be assessed if you're having problems, and saddle fit can also be a problem as well.
Interesting. We can get onto that.
And for me, I would automatically, if somebody was saying they're in pain when they're riding, or if there was something like that going on, I would automatically send them to a physio to get them sorts of tests to check what's happening. Obviously, a physio can then diagnose what's going on rather than just the guesswork. I would never do that, especially if there was pain issues going on. That would 100% be my recommendation as well.
As the resident everyday rider on this call, one thing that's come up in these conversations is dynamism versus like static stuff. So like keeping your body in a specific position because you think that's what your position on the horse should look like. And I've absolutely done this. My fixation on trying to keep my lower leg still just like took a whole year from my riding career because I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And what it ended up meaning was I just fixed through different parts of my body in an effort to keep my lower leg still. And I remember my coach, who knows me really well, and she was like, I see that you have been working hard on your position. I think you are working a bit too hard to stay there. So let's just have a look at what this looks like. And finding the balance between dynamism and static stuff is interesting. I know, Maeve, you talk a lot about how there's no point in stretching your hip flexors if you don't... there's no point in stretching your hip flexors in a static way if you then just don't strengthen them ever. Like, that's not going to make your hips more open. And Steph, obviously, I know from working on your programs that you're always about dynamic stretches, movement, as opposed to doing things that hold you in position. So if there's like... How do you feel about dynamic stretches before people get on board? Is that something that that people can implement, like from if they got off the podcast now and they went and were riding their horse next? Are there things they can do before they get on that are going to make a difference, or is this more of a you've got to invest a bit more than that to get somewhere?
Can we give them a little freebie? Is what we're trying to say.
I think it would be a bit of both. So yes, absolutely, they can warm up before they get on. That's an interesting point about the dynamic and static thing, because you're not static on a horse. So you shouldn't be trying to stay still. You have to move. You have to be able to absorb the movement that the horse is creating and the forces that the horse is creating. And they're actually quite big forces that the horse is creating depending on what gait you're in. And your body has to be able to dissipate that force. So to be able to kind of absorb it so you look like you're staying still, but you're not staying still.
Yeah, that's the beauty, right? You see professional riders and you think, oh, it looks like they're doing absolutely nothing.
Exactly.
Especially
not doing nothing. A lot
those
is going
powerful
on.
Dressage horses, and you're like, wow, it's all so fluid. And they were like, if I got on him, it would be like, what?
You would fall clean off the back. Most of us would, to be honest. Having ridden a couple of really high level dressage horses, like been given a ride on them, the amount of power and the amount, like the word absorption, that you feel that comes up through your hips, through your core, up into your body.
Absolutely.
Wowzers, that is.
And your body has to be able to cope with that and dissipate that force, and that's quite big amount of force.
Without ending up in like a holding state, because not only are they, like if you're thinking about like trot half pass, you have to be able to be very soft in the seat and stay sat down in the seat, and then one leg has to go back, one leg has to stay forward, you have to create bend in the neck, you have to be able to then move the hind leg to create the energy across and over. Like, there's so many things happening all at one time that if you were trying to hold yourself still, get a bike.
If you were trying to hold yourself still, you'd be doing like that to the poor horse.
We don't like that.
I see that a lot with riders that come to me with sit and trot, like a lot of people, especially pure dressage riders. So a lot of people say to me, I'm really struggling to isolate, like you said, a leg back while I'm trying to stay seated, not bounce around. And it's purely because they're not using the mechanics correctly, because they're not breathing, they're not using their body how they should, because they're just bracing and trying to hold everything as tight as they can. And actually, it's the complete opposite to what we're trying to achieve.
There's a analogy I often use when people grip. with their legs. Like they want to cling on like this. Everything wants to hold tight. I say to them, if you imagine that you were on a log in water, if you gripped on that log, you would become a dead weight and you'd tip underneath. Whereas if you sit on that log and you let your centre of balance be found in the middle, you're probably not going to fall in the lake or whatever whatever water.
Don't be a clothes peg.
Don't be a clothes peg.
Like
Lovely. Yeah.
But I find
that feeling. Don't be like, yeah.
Yeah, how unpleasant would that be for the horse?
I find as well people try and find it really hard to shift their own body weight in space. Like people really find it hard to transition where their body weight is. And that's self-awareness. And I find for me, I do a lot of work on the floor of changing the body weight, being able to shift from one leg to the other, and I find a lot of that helps in the saddle because people are a little bit more pliable to the movement rather than staying static and thinking I can't move because I'm going to fall off. It's like you say, it's about finding your own center of gravity, but being able to move as well. And like I say, shifting your weight from one foot to the other, whether that's obviously a lunge sequence or anything like that, that can be really beneficial and helpful. Just be aware of where your center of gravity is, because it does come down to a lot of self-awareness.
Actually, Maeve, I know you've talked about this before, the proprioception, which is rough definition, obviously jump in if this is wrong, but like the awareness of your body and how it's moving. Is that a sort of rough definition?
Yeah, it's like your sixth sense. So it's your awareness of where your body is in space. So if I close my eye, if I put my arm out to the side and close my eyes, I know my hand is out to the side.
Yes.
So it's that awareness of where your body is. So things like you know when you lose it, if you've sprained your ankle, you've rehabbed your ankle, you're all back to normal, and then you walk on cobblestones and you go over on your ankle because your proprioception, so those little sensors around that joint aren't telling your brain quickly enough where your joint is in space.
Yeah, well, actually, you've just made me think of two things. One is like if you ever go and sit on a simulator, a horse riding simulator, often if you've got something where you're not quite sitting the way that you should, they'll often say your proprioception is just a bit off, like your feeling of where your leg is or where it should be, because you've ridden like this for so long, and so then trying to correct that. But the other thing I was going to say is you talk a lot about how you don't need to stand on like a Bosu ball and do squats or one-legged things. You could literally stand on one leg with your eyes shut, and that would be a test of your proprioception. And like,
so balance is controlled by 3 sensory systems. Sorry, I'm going to go off on a tangent, but so you have 3 sensory systems that control your balance in your brain. So you have your visual system, your eyes, so that you can see where you are in space. You have your inner ear, your vestibular system, and you have your proprioceptive system, which is all these little sensors that are within your joints and your muscles. And so,
wow, this is a lot of information. Slow down, Maeve. This is good.
Sorry.
Slow down.
This is too much, is it?
No, it's great.
No, it's great.
Too geeky.
But just make sure your tempo doesn't go so fast that we can't keep up. Because I'm like,
no, it's not too much. We have a very clever audience. They will love this.
The science is coming out.
Yeah, we love it.
So basically, yes, your balance is controlled by these 3 sensory systems. So there is this theory, which has been proven in the literature as well, that to improve one system, you reduce the input from the other systems. So to improve your balance, say you want to reduce your proprioceptive input, so that will make your vestibular system and your visual system work harder. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes. Which one's vestibular again?
Vestibular is your inner ear.
Inner ear, okay,
so,
yeah. Okay.
For example, if you were to stand on one leg, you have all 3 systems going at the same time to try and keep you balanced, okay? So your eyes are working, your inner ear is working, and your proprioceptive system is working. So if you want to make things harder for your proprioceptive system, then you can reduce the input from one of the other systems. Sounds very complicated, but basically if you stand on one leg and move your head from side to side or up and down, then you're reducing the input from your vestibular system, therefore increasing the input from your visual system, your eyes, and your proprioceptive system. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Total sense.
And then if you stand on one leg and close your eyes, you've got rid of your visual system, therefore your proprioceptive system has to work harder and your vestibular system has to work harder to control your balance. So if you want to improve your balance and you want to improve your proprioception, then you're better doing things like standing on one leg, moving your head around or closing your eyes than you are by really challenging your proprioceptive system by standing on a wobbly surface. So if you stand on the wobbly surface, you're making your vestibular system and your visual system work harder, not your proprioceptive system. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That's really sciencey, sorry. But
but that's the kind of thing that I think is really interesting.
High risk of injuries by doing these things. So they drive me nuts. They come up in my social media literally every day. People jumping on and off buzzy balls or balancing on stupid things that are just high risk for injury for no benefit.
This is what
this is the hill that Maeve will die on.
Yeah, I have a few, but that's one of them. Yeah.
Please. Go for it, Steph.
I also second that. So yes, please stop.
Yeah.
Please stop.
I'm glad we have two people that agree. Can you imagine if you'd organised this, Rhi, and then they'd been like, no, I think Boso balls are great, and we'd have been like, oh God.
No, do you know what though? Because I followed Maeve for such a long time, and I've tried Activate Your Seat before, and I've still got one. It's in my gym bag every day. And when I started working with Steph, I was like, oh, this is interesting, because what if Steph and, the stuff that I've learned previously, to your point, like Bosu balls, for example, what if they're really different? And then I started to see some of the stuff Steph was talking about. And in fact, Steph, I think we had a conversation about Bosu balls. And I was like, oh, no, they're in complete alignment on this. This is great, because I really don't want to go back on one. Anyway.
We are fortunate to have Premier Performance as our lead sponsor for Series 1. Rhi and I have both used calming cookies a number of times in our lives. There's been many slightly stressful situations with horses that have called for a little extra help, and that is exactly what the calming cookies offer. They're magnesium free and completely competition safe, which means they don't have any prohibited substances in them, as defined by the FEI. This means you can use them if you are going to a show, going hacking, in need of a little extra help with a stressful situation for your horse. I find them to really help in encouraging the adrenaline not to spike, and it means that you can just support your horses in those slightly more difficult situations. We really appreciate the support from Premier Performance. You can use the code EquestrianLife20 for 20% off at checkout. I've got a question for you guys. So I have done some work with biomechanic physio, and actually I turned Maeve down years and years ago because you offered me your services. And I said, well, it was hard because I was working really regularly with a physio who is similar to Maeve in some ways, doesn't have an online coaching thing, but very similar biomechanics understanding. She's not a horse physio, actually, just a human physio. And we have done some sessions where we use elastic on the horse. So sees you ride, takes you off the horse, does some physio stuff, puts you back on again with pieces of elastic. Why is everybody looking worried? Should I stop you?
No, I've done this before, but I also know that these ladies have opinions on this.
Okay,
so
well,
this is going to be an interesting conversation.
Great. And for me, I find it very useful because, for example, I have laterally my left hip isn't as strong, and so my left leg I struggle with. I'm a bit not totally straight, and I have found this sort of stuff to be really helpful for me, like a light piece of elastic from one heel to opposite shoulder. Do you feel like actually this isn't the place for this kind of stuff, and it should, all of our symmetrical work, all of our strengthening work should be done when we're not riding? Or do you feel that then there is a place for on-horse work when it comes to the biomechanics?
I personally think there's a place for both, but unfortunately people don't do both.
Okay. Say more.
So for me, I see a lot of people obviously investing their time into the bands, working on the horse with them, which are great because they kind of give you that feel. They kind of, like you said, they really help you to understand where you're at. But then if you're not doing the work then off of the horse that's helping you strengthen the weakness that you're finding the band's helping you with, you're actually never going to improve what's happening. If you take the band away, you're going to be in exactly the same place.
Yeah,
because your horse is not your gym.
Yeah,
100%
exactly.
agree with Steph. I think there are time and a place for things on the horse. There are some that I have stronger opinions on than others. And my problem was about but a few years ago, it was all the rage. Everybody was being strapped into saddles and kinesio taped into saddles, but there was no exercise program been given with that? And like Steph says, it's absolutely useless in that context. So yes,
kind of
it'll give
like,
you an awareness of where you're going wrong, but it won't improve you long term.
because it's not actually giving over any responsibility to the rider, which is where
the reason that you're
has to
crooked
lie.
is that there's a weakness somewhere. So you know, the physio should be finding the weakness and giving you things to correct the weakness that are mainly done off the horse.
Maybe this is interesting and maybe it's not, and maybe it will help people, but for me, my left side is where I feel weaker, like in my left leg, and I sometimes will feel slightly like things going from my left leg are harder, like right leg going right in leg yield, for example. When I do a walking lunge, if I put my left leg forward while holding something heavy above my head, that's where I feel the wobble as such. That's that. I don't actually know why I'm telling you.
So I would
this,
look at
because
your
it's-
right
Oh,
gluteus medius for that.
Okay, so there we go. That's what I wondered. So actually, it's that reflection. It's the diagonal.
So it's
pair.
the ability to control your pelvis on the right side when you put your left leg on.
Yes.
So you have a muscle on the side of your pelvis called gluteus medius, and I'm going to go all geeky
Don't
again.
apologise. Carry
Apologies.
on. We love it.
But gluteus medius has two roles. So firstly, it moves your leg, it lifts your leg out to the side, helps bring your leg back, also helps rotate your hip a little bit. But its other role is in stabilizing your pelvis. So if you think of your pelvis as a fixed unit, so a fixed unit like that, then when you go to move one side, the other side has to work to keep that side down. Does that make sense? I don't know if there's a visual component with this podcast, but
We have clips.
stacks
it
of
can be.
videos on this on my Instagram. But basically, so say you go to give a left leg aid, your left gluteus medius has to help to bring your leg back, abduct your hip, bring your leg back a little bit as well. But your right gluteus medius has to hold that right side of your pelvis down. Otherwise, you do on the horse, you do a whole dip with the left leg. Does that make sense? And so a lot of people come to me and they say, oh, my left leg's really weak. And then when we actually test them, it's actually the right side of their pelvis that's the problem.
I tell you what this is stemming, is this is going to stem you and I, Maeve, maybe having a little chat together privately, I think. Because it's all well and good. It's all well and good. Will you take me back, please? Have me back. It's all well and good me going to the gym and doing all of this stuff, but if in between whiles I'm maybe not doing these little targeted things that actually will be the difference for me on a horse, I can do as many dumbbell thrusters as I like, but if I can't make my right glute med stay still, then I'm useless. Go for it, Steph.
And this is where the sport specific is a little bit more important, just because obviously I'm exactly the same. Obviously, I do CrossFit, I do all of that, which is a great mode of training. But when things are not quite symmetrical, things aren't going right, obviously we're never going to be completely symmetrical, but we're obviously aiming for that. When things aren't going right, CrossFit is very one plane of movement. There's not a lot of rotation that goes on. There's not a lot of lateral. It's very forwards and back. So it's all of them little sport specific accessories that are going to make the difference that you can add in. Yeah, there's great ways of training. You don't have to just do obviously boring gym stuff. You can do a lot of different things, but making sure you're getting them fundamental corrections to your training is going to be priceless, especially in the saddle.
Please don't take my adult PE away from me. I love it.
I do too, so no.
Okay, we've talked a lot about bodies, obviously, in this conversation, and I'm going to go, I was going to say it's a bit woo-woo, but it's not really, because I think mental and the psychology side of fitness is a really interesting space. So just to put an example out there, and then I want to hear from you both as to whether you think there's a connection and whether you can quote unquote train for it. So I took my horse out for arena hire by myself for the first time recently, and I was riding around and having a lovely time, feeling really strong. But I also realised that I felt super confident in my ability, both in my ridden ability, but also the confidence that like I can solve challenges that are put in front of me in this moment, and I'm not afraid of failure. And I was sort of thinking it through, and I was like, I think it's down to like the stuff I've been doing in the gym there would have been times when I was set an exercise and I was so afraid of failing at it that I would actually get butterflies in my stomach. I'd be like so scared that I wasn't going to be able to do it. And I had to really sit down with myself and be like, what does failure even mean in this context? Like, all that happens is that you go home and you try another day. But I think doing that has made me mentally strong, which has made me a better mentor for my horse. Does this feel like it resonates? And if so, how does one train for this? Maeve, you were nodding. Let's start with you. What's your thought?
I think you get better at doing hard things by doing hard things. So the stuff that you're doing in the gym is hard. I don't go to the gym. I've got kids and businesses and life, and I don't have time. But I do hill run.
You run, and you run quick as well. Like, you don't just run. You're very good at it, and you run up hills.
I'm not that good at it, and I've only been doing it for about 3 or 4 years. But I've got really into it. I think if I stopped riding, I would actually start properly trail running. I really enjoy it, and we've got hills on our doorstep, so I'm very lucky that way. But I tell you, running up hills makes you really much mentally strong, mentally resilient. Definitely, I 100% agree with you. I think doing hard things makes you tougher and makes you more mentally resilient, and therefore the stresses of life and horses are easier to deal with in lots of ways.
I think as well, finding something that you enjoy doing. It's like, it doesn't have to be all the set things. And this is why when I work with people, like on a personalized basis, we find what people enjoy. And I know you can edit this out if you don't want me to say it, Rhi, but I know there was a couple of weeks ago, I gave you a really, really hard rowing conditioning piece.
You did.
And she messaged me and she was like, I don't think I can do this. I was like, give it a go, see what happens. And she did it. Absolutely great. Then there was a couple of weeks after, she did something very, very similar.
Yeah.
And she messaged me saying, I've just quit, and literally had a meltdown over this rowing piece. I was like, that's okay. I was like, it was there for a reason. Yeah. And it was more of a mental challenge than anything, because we knew Rhi could do the paces that I'd set her. Like, we knew she could do it. But then we start to look at, okay, what she got going on at work, what she got going on at home, how she slept, what she eaten, all of them kind of things. Because thinking more of a holistic approach is really important, because it's all well and good doing your rider fitness and riding your horses and the training. And this is something I'm battling at the moment. With a lot of riders, is the underfueling side of things. Like, how many riders go to a competition, have a coffee and a chocolate bar, and then that will be all they have. I mean, some riders come to me and they've not drunk, they've not had any water in the last probably 12 hours. And I'm like, how are you expecting to be at your very best?
Miri's hiding.
I feel like there's a guilty party here. But yeah, no, how are you expecting to be at your best and performing at your optimum if you're not thinking about all of these things? And that comes back to obviously what I said at the beginning about obviously all the things we do for our horses, but actually we're not thinking about ourselves in the big picture. And we're 50% of the partnership. Obviously we can't do it without our horse, but our horse also can't perform without us being at our best either. So I think that's another approach and something really interesting to think about.
100% agree. I actually put a video on a couple of weeks ago. I had a conversation with one of my eventers, and they have started, he uses a bungee every day before he gets on the horses. He's in his 60s and he events at a very high level. And they've also started working with a PT who comes in and does like 2 fitness sessions a week. And he was like, I'm really tired after it. I was like, well, what are you eating? And he is one of those people that drinks coffee all day and then has a massive evening meal and will ride 6-7 horses, do loads of yard jobs, and then was also doing this as well. It's like, oh my God. So we had this massive conversation about just trying to get him to work out what he could eat. And yeah, about fueling his body properly. It's frightening.
And I think as well, something to be conscious of is obviously a lot of the number one, and to be fair, you said it earlier, so the number one thing I find it's really interesting, people are always like, I don't have time. And they're like, I'm so busy, I don't have time. And it's such a common thing. And obviously it is hard because with the horses, there's so much to think about. But actually, just getting that routine and that habit and building them healthy habits, you can do it. It doesn't take 2 minutes. Once you get into a routine, you will continue to do it. So a massive one for me is making sure my riders have got a water bottle with them. That's like my number one mission at the moment. So wherever they go, they've always got a water bottle with them, because if you've got it with you, you're more likely to drink. And it's just little healthy habits like that. And obviously, when I'm coaching one-to-one, I'm constantly chasing people. I'm like, have you done this today? Are we good? Anything we need? So that's obviously something I'm personally on a bit of a mission with at the moment, is the whole underfueling, underslept athletes.
For me, I'm that person. I have 14 horses in work. My day is busy. It's a bit ridiculous some of the time. And I listened to a podcast a while back, and it was talking about protein at breakfast, like protein first thing in the morning. And when I say it has changed my life, it has changed my life. I am a completely different person having eaten a proper amount of protein in the first, before I try to do anything. Like, I'm more regulated, and it's to do with your blood sugar, right? So if you eat sugar first thing in the morning, you have a big spike of blood sugar, and then you have a dip. Whereas if you eat protein first thing in the morning, protein synthesis takes place, I assume, and then you can then eat glucose as you go through the day more easily without noticing such a big dip. So your blood sugar is much more stabilized. Am I correct? The coaches are nodding. I'm not too far off the point. But the difference for me is so enormous. I noticed there are days when I'd eat like something sugary on toast, and I'd be like, by 10 a.m. I feel pretty crap. Whereas if I eat eggs on toast for breakfast, I feel pretty good until like 1 o'clock. And then I will maybe eat something with something sweet in it at like 11 to keep me going until I finished riding all of the horses I've got to ride. But the difference is enormous, and fueling yourself, it just takes a bit of effort. And I'm going to be mean about this, because if you tell me you don't have time, get off TikTok. Seriously. And there are apps that can help you. Google is the most magical thing. It will give you all of the information you need. You just need to put a bit of time and effort into that. And the difference you will feel from a burnt out, absolutely broken horse rider, I promise it is worth putting the effort into it.
But
yeah, and it doesn't have to be overly complicated. I wouldn't have
No.
a lot of time in the morning with trying to get kids out the door and then going and mucking out before I start work. But I never skip a meal, full stop. But I certainly don't skip breakfast. I would die if I skipped breakfast. Yeah. But I would I'd literally bung a bit of frozen fruit in the microwave and then put some Greek yogurt and a bit of muesli on it, and I get about 30 grams of protein that way. Right. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to cook yourself an omelette.
No, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of research around, there was like loads of stuff around intermittent fasting, right? And it being like super, and I won't get into it too much, but loads of those studies were done on men.
Yeah, it's not great for women.
No.
And particularly women of my age I'm going to be 47 this year. I'm in the depths of perimenopause. It's not good for women of any age, but particularly when you're perimenopausal, it's not good. You need to eat.
Is that your body struggles with the hormone regulation?
I think your body struggles with everything.
Just an absolute nightmare, basically, in general.
Yeah. All those studies, pretty much all those studies are done in men. There's very few in women.
I think as well, a lot of people try and overcomplicate it because of social media. There's so much out there. The media is a terrible place for this, because it's saying 1 week do this, 1 week do that, and it gets really confusing. And so I think for anybody wanting to try and create a little bit more of a healthy habit, I think just making small changes, but they have to be manageable. I think when people try and do everything all at once, so people are trying to drink 3 litres of water a day, they're trying to eat healthily, they're trying to go to the gym, they're trying to ride their horse and do all of the things, it's too much. Like, people need to simplify it a little bit and just make it achievable, because you're more likely to obviously sustain it, for one. And you can always add things in. So you can start with one thing and then progress to another and then to another until you build this full thing, rather than it just being hit and miss.
Yeah, you touched on something there, which I think most of our listeners are women, actually, and so something that has also become sort of quite trendy, which I don't hate because I think it's a conversation that wasn't really around much more, was syncing your workouts to your cycle. So thinking about the 4 stages of a menstrual cycle and when you have most energy, when you don't. Maeve's already shaking her head. What I was going to say was I keep an eye on it because I find not so much that I feel more tired or less strong, although sometimes that's the case, but more because I have other symptoms like being unfocused or feeling a bit more anxious, and being able to say, oh, this is not that you're failing at your job or that you're just a very anxious person. This is actually just hormonal changes, and that's fine. But I know that, Steph, like, you set workouts that are based on a perceived rate of exertion. No, is that right? Perceived rate of exertion. Yeah. So your athletes can just drop from a 9 to a 7 or a 6 if they're like, I'm just not feeling that strong today. Do you want to start? And then I want to go to Maeve because you had a big reaction to my cycling workouts piece.
Yeah, so I think this is a really interesting one. Obviously, some people feel a massive change with training. I'm talking specifically to training here. Yeah. Some people feel no different whatsoever. It depends on the person. At the end of the day, unless you're obviously very, very in tune with your cycle, you track it, and you're syncing your competitions up to your cycle and things like that. Right. That obviously would get very, very complicated in the equestrian world. But unless you're doing that kind of thing, and I don't really think there's any elite, I might be wrong, but I don't think there's any elite athletes doing that in everyday sport. You need to, obviously, you're going to still compete within your cycle. So obviously when you're not necessarily feeling at your best. So like you said, I always work off a scale. So if someone says to me, oh, not feeling great today, okay, that's fine. Let's drop the percentage a little bit. Let's make sure we're moving well. Let's not worry too much about obviously maxing out and stuff like that. It's probably not going to be realistic. Again, somebody else might 1 rep max. They might be lifting at their heaviest. It just depends. It's person to person personally. But like I said, you're going to be competing year round. So preparing yourself to, sometimes you're not always going to be feeling on top form. So how do we navigate that? How do we move through that?
Yeah. Maeve?
I just had a reaction because cycle syncing is all the rage at the minute. And you do yoga when you've got your period.
That's like, the only out there, like, walk and do yoga and stretch, and I'm like, what?
Exactly. So don't get overly fixated by it. Like Steph says, go by, it's N equals 1. So yes, keep a record. Yes, check in with your own body, but one person's cycle is going to be very different from another person's cycle and the symptoms that they feel. So you don't have to stop doing any exercise just because you've got your period. Like Steph says, there are going to be times where you're going to have to be competing. So don't get overly fixated about it. Yes, it's worth checking in and seeing how you feel, but don't.
I think something Rhi and I have spoken a lot about is if you understand when your cycle is, like you actually know what's happening, when you feel like shit warmed up and you're like, oh God, I just feel so rubbish, can't do anything, oh my God, my life is falling apart, and then you get your period 2 days later, it probably would have been useful to know that you might get your period in 2 days when you feel like shit warmed up. And I think this is that awareness piece. Again, we're also bloody disconnected from being a human being that walks on the earth, that is controlled by the literal moon. Like, you're 80% water or whatever it is. Like, come on, guys. Be aware of those things, because then you're going to know yourself better and you're going to know how to help yourself better, how to fuel yourself. I need to be nice to myself right now because I might be feeling this is why I'm feeling a bit shit, because my period's coming. Or, for me, actually, I get really anxious when around ovulation. Don't totally know the reasoning why, but I know to be kind to myself, and I know that it's not that my world is falling apart and life is spiraling. It's that my body's having a hard time for whatever reason. So I use a great great app. It's free. There's loads of different options. It's beautiful too. It's called Stardust. I'll shout it out. Why not? And it you get to see, and it sends you these funny notifications, and it says you're probably going to want to eat a house today. That's what other people have noticed, is that they get really hungry at this point in their period, and at this point of their cycle, and you're like, oh yeah, I do feel like that. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks. I'm going to go have a little cry and carry on.
But yeah, I think cycles can become a bit trendy, and so has menopause and perimenopause, but actually I'm all for that because it's highly informative, and people need to be more aware of the chaos that their body is descending into as we head into perimenopause, and keeping maybe a note of that and knowing what to then speak to the doctor about. And there can be huge symptoms with anxiety, lack of sleep. Obviously there's things like oh, sorry, this is perimenopause, brain fog. But there are also symptoms of hot flushes, all the standardised ones. But there are a lot of physical symptoms as well that I see that people come to me in clinic with. So there can be lots of links with tendon pain, with joint aches and pains, with muscle pain, that kind of thing. So I think being aware of that and the awareness around that at the moment is really useful for a lot of people.
I think as well, just people understand it's okay for things not to be perfect all the time. And this is with obviously the training we've done, Rhi. Like, it's okay if a workout doesn't go right, or if your training session hasn't gone well, that's okay. That's normal. And I think so with social media, it's always about how perfect people are and what other people are doing and what it should look like. And actually, that is a highlight reel. So just understanding that is you seeing the highlights. Like, other people are in the same position as you. They are finding things hard as well. It's not all going to be amazing all the time.
I think a good way of noticing that is you think to yourself, if I was an influencer, like if you don't post on social media, but you're looking at everybody else posting on social media, you'd think to yourself, what would I be sharing? Like, what would be the things I would be choosing to share? And how much of your life is that reality? And then you
how
look,
much
and
can
then
it be as well? Even if you're open and honest, you can't give everything, because you've got about 10 seconds before someone clicks away and goes to the next trending sound or whatever it is.
Absolutely. So just not judging yourself by other people's highlight reel is so valid. 100%.
I have a question, but it feels like a kind of closer. So is there anything else that either of you were like, or Miri, that you like really want to talk about or ask?
I'd say we're there, Rhi. Hit us with the closer.
Yeah. Okay, so my question for you both is, if people get off this call right now and podcast right now, and they're like, I feel really inspired, what's one thing that they should start and one thing that they should stop, like as an immediate starting point?
Nice.
Do you want to go first, Steph? Your eyebrows went right up into your...
She's thrown me in the deep end there. There was no heads up. Okay, so one thing to start, think about what you can control, whether that is taking a water bottle with you, whether that is working with a coach that's going to help you do all of these things. Yeah, doing something that's going to help you, but also help your horse. Because I think that's what's important. The more we help ourselves, the more that is going to transition over to what we're doing in the saddle. Things to leave behind. Good question. There's so many.
Bosu balls.
Don't be polite.
Bosu balls, but I felt like I needed to leave that.
I was joking.
I wasn't. No, I'm going to leave that one. But
it's true though. Things to leave behind. Trying to correct everything that you're doing wrong on the horse. Take it away from the horse, fix it on the ground, and then put it back on the horse. And I guarantee it'll change what you're trying to achieve. So don't try and fix the problems sat in the saddle. Fix the problems on the ground.
Love that.
Top
I love that, Steph. You beat me to that one.
Sorry.
Oh no! Did she steal your one, and now you've got to think of another one?
I I tried to save you Bosu balls.
Sorry.
I think we've covered Bosu balls. I think everybody knows how we feel.
There's currently lots of fires going on in people's gardens with them incinerating them in their back garden.
I'll try and keep it short. One thing to stop doing, stop fixing through your abdominals. Stop bracing through your abdominals, trying to achieve more core in the saddle. Because all that's doing is blocking your breathing and blocking your ability for your pelvis to move with your horse and blocking your ability to absorb the movement from the horse. So stop being fixated about bracing, fixing through your abdominals, and just think about breathing using your diaphragm so that you're doing 360-degree breathing. And if you don't know what I mean, have a look at my Instagram. There are tons of videos on it, and I make that free. I don't put that behind any kind of paid anything. That is free. I want every rider to be able to breathe properly. And then things to take forward, well, breathing would be number one. Breathing using your diaphragm, but also think more of problems that I see that riders have in the saddle when the asymmetries or positional issues that they have tend to come back to a problem within the muscles of their hips and their pelvis. So think about targeting those muscles rather than being so obsessed by your abdominal muscles. So think more about working on symmetry of your all the muscles around your hips and your pelvis, and doing that off the horse, like Steph said, will bring you huge value on the horse.
Amazing. I mean, what an absolute privilege to have had you both, because I know how busy and booked you both are with some of the best riders in the country and the world, actually. So we're really privileged that you spend a bit of time with us. We're going to put all of the details for Steph and Maeve in our show notes so you can follow them, you can find their websites, things that they offer, and follow up with them in those sort of ways. But yeah, it's been a fab conversation. I feel very excited. I'm going to go to the gym immediately after this as well, so this was great timing for me personally.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming along, guys. We really appreciate it, and we hope that everybody learnt something and gained something from this conversation today. I certainly learnt a lot of things that I think I'm going to take away. So yeah, really, what a wonderful conversation we have had.
Thank you for having me.
It's been wonderful. I think we've got 2 episodes left, Miri, of season 1.
Yeah, 2 episodes left of season 1, and then we'll have a little gap, and then we're working into season 2. If, as ever, guys, if you have any questions for us and you've got anything that you would like to for us to talk about, then please do drop us an email. It's in the show notes, and we will see you guys next time. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Bye.